Welcome to the Boston Red Sox Virtual STEM Education Series presented by Moderna. I'm Jemai Webster here with Nesson, the official broadcast network of the Boston Red Sox, and we are so excited to have you here with us today since we cannot be at the ballpark together. Teachers, parents, students, pets, and families, thank you for joining us as we all learn together with Moderna, Nesson, JetBlue, iRobot, Synovian Pharmaceuticals, and the Boston 25 weather team, and have some fun surrounding STEM education and baseball. We'll be here weekly with the new STEM lesson from some of our wonderful partners and activities that you can do yourselves in the classroom or at home. We hope you'll be able to join us each week, and thank you again for being part of the fun. Have you ever wished you had a robot to help you do your household chores? Our friends at iRobot have just that. But how do they work? Put on your safety goggles and follow along with the teardown worksheet as we learn about the robotics and engineering that make an iRobot Roomba.
Hey everyone, my name is Irene and I'm on the product management team here at iRobot. So why are we taking apart a Roomba? Well, taking something apart is one of the best ways to learn how something works, especially with robots that have multiple components that need to come together to perform one function. For example, on the Roomba, it's cleaning intelligently. So let's get started. We're gonna start taking this robot apart. We're in Lewis's lab right now. Lewis is an electrical engineer at iRobot. And so let's begin. Number one rule is to start with the safety glasses, right? Alright, so we have this bumper. We have a variety of sensors, but the first step to taking apart the robot is to flip it upside down. Alright, let's take out the rubber rollers. So we have two. These are our rubber rollers. They have chevron-shaped fletches on them. The fletches are used to pick up debris and basically scoop them into the bin. We have a piezoelectric sensor right here. We use that for our dirt detect feature. It basically listens for a lot of noise, which tells us that there is a lot of debris on the ground and that we need to do a deeper clean.
First up, we'll take the bin out. This bin has no electronics. It's what's considered a washable bin. So the older ones had a motor assembly built in them, so you couldn't wash or clean the bin as easily as the new generation.
And when we wash it, we want to take the filter out, correct?
Yep. Next step would be to remove the side brush.
So we use this side brush to pick up debris, and you'll see that with the sweeping motion, the debris in corners and on edges of walls will be swept into the bin as well.
Next step is to remove the bottom protective cover. The bottom cover serves to provide protection for the battery and the electronics. It also provides a smooth surface so the robot can transition over obstacles and anything that might be on the floor. And that's held in with screws that are actually marked for easy serviceability. And the battery's already been removed from the robot, so we don't have a battery.
Just as a precaution, whenever you take apart an electronic, make sure that the battery is out for safety. So we currently don't have a battery in this robot, but if we did and we wanted to charge this robot, we would line up the charging contacts with the proper mate on the dock. So for all of our robots, they know how to find their own home and they know how to dock so that these metal contacts meet with the contacts on the dock. You'll see that there are two features that are lining up here between the dock and the robot. We call that the Archon. Lewis, can you tell us more about the Archon?
Archon is an optical sensor built into the robot and the dock. The first feature of the Archon is to provide what we call a halo. It's an invisible circle of light in infrared around the dock, and that prevents the robot during a mission from accidentally bumping into the dock. The second optical feature on the robot is on the front here. There's a little IR window, and inside the window are two emitters. We call them binoculars, and essentially it produces two beams of light, and when the robot decides to drive onto the dock to do it with precision, it uses the Archon to look at those two beams of light and tries to stay in the middle. So as a Roomba docks, you'll notice it slowly zigzags left and right, and the closer it gets, it turns into a perfectly straight line and then drives onto the dock. And that allows us to make the robot contacts as small as possible and as efficiently not use up space for other functions and still land on the charging dock. Around the perimeter of the robot, we have cliff sensors. Those are optical sensors that detect essentially the lack of floor under the robot. So if it's driving up to the edge of a step or a landing, as soon as a signal is no longer reflected back from the floor, the robot comes to an immediate stop to prevent itself from falling over. We have 4 front cliff sensors and 2 in the back, so if the robot is spinning around and backing up, it doesn't back off a cliff as well.
So right here we have an optical mouse sensor. This works exactly like the laser mice that you would have connected to a computer. This laser shines down on a surface and then will track the movement. So for our robot's case, it'll know in which direction and how far it's going. Our mobility system here is made up of these 2 wheels and a caster. As you can see, our wheels aren't connected here. We have 3 wheels because 3 points of contact make a plane. And we have 2 wheels that drive independently so that we can spin in place. This is really important for our mobility system because we can get out of tight spots. All right, let's take apart the wheel module. All right, we have our right wheel module now. You can hear clicking. We'll take apart the module so we can see what that's about.
Just be careful when you go to take that plastic cover off.
Yeah.
The spring is under tension, so when you pull it off, it's going to try and snap back.
Oh, okay, got it. Tell us a little bit more about the insides of the wheel module.
Okay, inside the wheel module is essentially a DC brushed motor, and a brushed motor is one of the simplest motors you can design. You give it a DC voltage from a battery, and it will turn in one direction. If you swap the polarity, it will turn in the opposite direction. They're very reliable, they're very powerful, low cost. That is connected to, inside this plastic, a gearbox, which essentially is a transmission. It lets us optimize torque from the motor to give us the best performance and battery life and traction to the robot. As we already mentioned, there was a spring inside the robot, and that provides essentially a shock absorber or a suspension for the robot, so it forces its wheels to stay on the ground at all times. You may not hear it, but there's a little switch sound. That is a micro switch, which you can kind of see in here. The micro switch lets the robot know that its wheels have left contact with the ground, and that's a safety feature. If someone picks up the robot and the wheels stop turning immediately. Another part of the assembly is a small magnetic disc. In order for us to know how fast the wheel is turning, this is a magnetic encoder. It essentially just counts the number of revolutions, and essentially it becomes like the speedometer in your car.
We'll take the other wheel module out.
Alright, so here's our wheel module taken apart, and as I mentioned, it's a DC motor found in drills and tools throughout the world. And it runs off a battery, and I just have here under the bench a 12-volt battery with some leads, and if I connect it one way, red to red, black to black, you'll notice the wheel spins in one direction. We'll call that forward. If the robot decides it has to stop and go the other way, all we do inside the robot is switch the polarity, and it spins the other way. This is the front caster assembly, which provides mechanical stability for the robot at all times. It's easily removable for cleaning.
Lewis, how does that stay in there?
There's a machine feature on the central shaft that's held in, and it just snaps in place. So, and it's in for good, but easy enough to remove without tools.
So on our older models, our casters actually were black and white. Lewis, can you tell us a little bit more about why?
Yes. On the older robots, in order to determine if the robot itself had become beached or basically bottomed itself out, the wheels would still spin. So we mentioned there was a speedometer built inside the wheel module. The robot would think it's moving, but in actuality it wasn't. It had a second way of knowing I was moving. The modern robots have the optical mouse sensor, which is looking at the floor. So if the robot says, I'm spinning my wheels, and the mouse sensor says, I'm not, we can say, we're not moving anywhere. The older robots didn't have the optical mouse sensor, so what we did is we painted the wheel caster half black, half white. So if we didn't see white, black, white, black, white, black, white, black, we weren't moving.
So the i7 is our first robot that has this little fuzzy guy feature. Lewis, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. This essentially is a series of carbon brush fibers, and its function is to dissipate static electricity so it doesn't build up on the robot. An unusual fact about robots is as they move across different floor types, since they have spinning parts of different materials, it builds up a static electricity, just like if you shuffled across the carpet in the dry winter day. So the idea behind this brush is as the robot's continuously moving around, it's bleeding off the charge, so it doesn't get a chance to build up that much voltage.
Okay, let's take out the cleaning head.
Okay, so that should be 1, 2, 3, it should be 4 screws. If you notice, when you loosen the screws, they don't come all the way out, they stay held in place. And that's for easy serviceability, so when you pull the module out, the screws don't fall off and scatter across the floor.
All right, we have our cleaning head. So Lewis, let's talk about the suspension within the cleaning head.
Sure. Much like the wheel assembly, which the robot has to adapt to different floor heights and types, when transitioning over a threshold or a transition to different floor types, if the cleaning head were fixed, it would bump in and try and bounce the robot. So much like the wheels, the cleaning head actually floats. And this allows it to maintain the optimum force down on the floor as it cleans and automatically adapt as we go from a hardwood floor to a heavily carpeted floor.
So 2 of the 5 motors that we have in the robot assembly are actually within this cleaning head. One of them we use to actuate the rubber rollers, and the other one we use to actuate our blower motor. So within our cleaning head, we actually also have 2 out of the 3 steps for cleaning. They're agitation, suction, and then collection, which happens in the bin. So with agitation, like we mentioned, we use the rubber rollers and that collects the debris. Suction comes from the blower motor. And to take it back one step, this was actually from our 500 series. And so you'll see that our brushes are different. In our current model, we use rubber brushes for both. And for our dual brushes in the 500 series, we have 1 rubber brush and 1 bristle brush. Lewis, let's go through the primary differences through this evolution.
Sure. The bristle brush is really no different than a hairbrush. The disadvantage of using a hairbrush to clean carpet is it, much like a hairbrush, wraps hair around it. So you would have to routinely take these out and pull the hair and cut the hair away from the brush. With the new air extractors, the rubberized extractors, they don't have the same bristle structure. So they are much less likely to wrap hair around them, so it requires much less user intervention.
So we've been making the Roomba since 2002, and as you can see, we've had an evolution in cleaning heads. This is because with engineering, there's always iteration and improvement and research that goes into, making your, first design better. Through our evolution, we went through dual brushes, so both rubber and bristle, to rubber and bristle combination, all the way to this was our first evolution into just dual rubber brushes. So now that we've taken the robot apart, you can see that the robot is made up of a bunch of different modules, but they aren't really just smushed together. They're actually placed very deliberately within the robot. You can see that all of our robots have wheels, they all have casters, they all need a battery compartment, space for a cleaning head, and space for the bin. This form factor is really important for us to maintain, and actually we have a really deliberate height that we design our robots to. If you can imagine how a robot would move around your house, we put a lot of thought into the spaces that a robot might travel to. We've designed the robot so that it is short enough to get under the couch, but still can accommodate all the modules it needs to. This is a product of testing that we do here at iRobot. Lewis, you're involved in that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what tests we put our robots through?
Sure. It takes about 3 to 4 years to develop a robot, and then when you're done, you have to prove that the design works. And you have to simulate every environment we think the robot will come across. So we do environmental testing, temperature testing, shake, rattle, and roll, where the robot undergoes something as simple as if someone drops the UPS box, does the robot survive? We test battery life, we test cleaning performance, we test reliability, how many years will it last in the field before the wheel modules fail, the motors fail. But testing is a very large part of robot development.
Well, Lewis, thank you so much for being an invaluable resource and for letting us into your lab.
My pleasure, anytime, happy to do it.
All right, that was awesome. Even though I work with robots every single day, I continually find myself learning new things about iRobot, Roomba, and all the technology that we work with. So now that you've gotten a glimpse of what it takes to build a robot, we have a question for you. What robot would you build? What problems would it solve? What would it look like, and how would it move? These are all questions we think about at iRobot. It all starts with an idea. Thanks for joining us today. Stay curious and keep innovating.
Thanks, Irene and Lewis. How cool are robots? I wonder what else we could design a robot to help us do. I bet you guys have some ideas out there of your own. Let us know by posting your ideas and designs online using the hashtag SocksSTEM. Let's keep taking apart things to learn how they work. In fact, have you ever wondered what a baseball is made of? Let's take one apart and see. Our friends at Nesson Clubhouse and Baseball Lab are here to show us.
We're here and we're about to dissect a baseball, and I hope it's not as gross because I dissected a worm in science class, and I hope it's not as gross as that.
No, yeah, definitely not. So first we're gonna start out by dissecting an MLB baseball.
So now you have to cut in the laces?
Yep, so since the laces pretty much stitch the two pieces of leather together, the first part is just to cut through these stitches to break the leather free, and that way you can peel back the leather and get a better look at what's inside the ball.
So it's basically just a bunch of string?
So yeah, just underneath the leather, it's just pretty much just they wind up a lot of string underneath. The first layer is this cotton layer. It's just thin cotton string wound up with like a little bit of a cement coat to kind of hold it together.
That is a lot of string.
So yeah, right underneath this, you can kind of start to see it now. It's a lot of wool. It's 3 different winds of wool.
So now how long does a dissection take?
It usually takes about a half hour. So yeah, now you can start to see the next layer of wool underneath being exposed a little.
There's a lot of wool on my hand.
So this is the second wind of the wool. You want to?
Yeah.
This is why it takes a half hour to dissect one of the balls. Once we get through this, we'll be able to see the rubber pill at the center of the baseball. We look at what's inside the baseball. We have the leather and the outermost layer, and then the cotton winding, and then there's the third wind, the second wind of wool, and then the largest and innermost third wind of wool. And here we have the pill, and we can actually look at what's inside the pill. So here you can see kind of the pill, the center of the ball, has kind of a red outer layer, and then kind of a black rubber inner layer, and then at the very center, there's this kind of small cork.
Wow, there's a lot more to a baseball than I ever knew. Maybe Xander can knock the cover off one of those for us this season. Well, thank you for joining us for week 2 of the Red Sox Virtual STEM Education Series presented by Moderna. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled STEM lesson. And in the meantime, go Sox.